Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of what I guess we're going to call the LAWcast, because we only know how to call things one thing. At least it's not LAWcast 5000 working title.
LAWcast 3000.
Anyway, I'm your host, the man they call the Law, and as you can hear there in the background, joining me today in the guest chair, we have the one and only Cewsh. How are you doing, man?
I am doing excellently. We have revisited the most juicy era in wrestling history for me, and I can't wait to talk about it.
It really is. So since we're here in the post-WrestleMania season, I wanted to take a look at some shows that serve as the follow-up to big shows in the history of wrestling. And today we're breaking down the follow-up to one of the biggest shows ever in professional wrestling. That's Backlash 2001, the follow-up show to WrestleMania 17. As you've already said, and I agree with you, I think this is one of the most interesting time periods in professional wrestling history. This is what I would call the end of wrestling history, because it's kind of the last chapter in the book so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, we just spent like half an hour talking about it before we even started recording, because it's just, there's so many questions that go along with this, and we'll get into all of that. But man, like, there were so many people interested. There were so many moving parts going into this show. Like, it's incredible that this is kind of a forgotten show, and we're going to go through all this ridiculous stuff that happens on it that people don't even remember.
Oh, it's crazy. There were like years worth of huge events that happened in the couple months before this show. So just real quick to set the stage, 2000 airs April 29th, 2001 from the Allstate Arena. That's the Rosemont Horizon, just north of Chicago. In the run-up to this show, here are a couple things that happened. Paul Heyman debuted in the WWF on March 5th, which was the signal that ECW was for real dead. It had been on life support for a while, but this is when we all realized that it was done. And also the people who worked for ECW found out it was done when they turned on Raw and saw Heyman on commentary, because he hadn't told any of them.
Awkward.
Yeah, a little bit. March 23rd, Vince finalized the deal to buy WCW, and the final Nitro aired a few days after that on March 26th, which is crazily 6 days before WrestleMania. So the WrestleMania go-home show was the one where they did the simulcast, where Vince was on both Raw and Nitro at the same time. So then 6 days later on Sunday, they present WrestleMania 17, which was the biggest WrestleMania ever to that point, and still one of the biggest WrestleManias of all time. It did over 1 million buys. The big selling point was the main event for the World Wrestling Federation Championship, Steve Austin versus The Rock. Austin got the win and won the title after he turned heel, made a deal with the devil, joined forces with Vince McMahon. Huge turn, one of the biggest events in wrestling history. So just to get going on this point, were you watching it at this point, and what did you think of Austin's heel turn?
I had actually just come back to watching wrestling, basically around Fully Loaded a million times, but I used to watch when I was a kid, and then I had to stop because I powerbombed a teddy bear through my window. Let's not.
Yeah. At this point, you'd done your 3-year sentence, and you were back.
Yes, my parents stopped paying close attention to what I watched on television. So as a 15-year-old, I broke back into it in 2000. So yeah, this was my just getting back into it stuff. I am way, way, way into all of this right at this point, right? I loved the whole storyline going in, like, it's indelibly etched in my memory. I do remember, and this is probably the biggest thing for me, I didn't know what WCW was, had never heard of it, no idea who anybody in it was, so the invasion was a huge mystery to me. But yeah, I was all about this show, all about it.
I'm always interested in how many people had no idea what WCW was when they did the invasion, because even though Nitro was doing huge numbers for a while, but there was always some degree of non-crossover fans who were only watching one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, like, literally, I think I had seen Diamond Dallas Page's face before on a wrestling magazine at a grocery store. So when he took the mask off, I like vaguely knew that he was a dude. But the whole invasion was just like a mystery of nobodies to me. Like, if they had got
WCW NWO Revenge.
What's that?
WCW NWO Revenge.
I don't think I had ever even played that. Like, I think that
I missed out because that was an awesome
Yeah,
game.
I was like straight into the SmackDown games. I never played in like the N64 ones. So like I even missed that way in.
Yeah. Well, so where we were, the rumor at this point is that WCW is going to get a new TV show, presented by the WWF. Their time slot is rumored to be Saturday nights from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., which is not exactly an ideal time slot. And if I'm remembering this right, one of the rumors from the time, they sent out a survey with different names, and one of the proposed names was WCW Late Night Appetite, which I grip you the same way that Thunder or Nitro did.
Late night appetite.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Uh,
I would
Somehow that
I would
never
give
came
any
to
amount of money
pass.
to see I would give any amount of money to see the rest of that list. I am just so curious.
That was the worst one. I can't. None of the other ones were bad enough that I remember them. Um,
Okay.
so where we were business wise, the WWF is the last man standing. They have all the chips. They have bought a number of WCW wrestlers' contracts, but the only really big stars they had were Booker T and DDP. Um, Hogan, Goldberg, Nash, and Sting, and the rest of those guys all had contracts exclusive with Turner, and were not going to, get out of them to come work for less money for the WWF. So they don't have any of the top guys. So the idea is they're going to hold off on the invasion for a while until they can, bring in more of the top guns. So the Raw after WrestleMania does a 5.7 rating, which is a good number, and like a full point from the previous year. And just to put it in context, a 5.7 is less than what they averaged for the year 1999, where they averaged over a 6. So they're still running pretty hot, and a 5.7 rating would be crazy huge today. But you can see there's been some decline. Their business has softened a little bit. And so the Raw after WrestleMania is built around trying to get everybody to boo Steve Austin. In the main event, they do a WrestleMania rematch where he faces off with The Rock in a steel cage match. Austin retains the title with the help of Vince and Triple H, who swerves everybody, comes out, and it looks like he's going to fight Austin, but instead he turns and beats up Rock, and they debut the two-man power trip, Steve Austin and Triple H as a team. What'd you think of those guys teaming up at this point?
I actually thought it was a phenomenal idea. I mean, Triple H is somebody who doesn't have any trouble getting heat, and that's obviously what Austin's biggest trouble was. So putting them together was great. They had never really been associated. I mean, they had feuded a lot of times, but they had never really been associated like this
They
before.
were in a white hot feud a month before this.
Right.
It turned out that Triple H was the guy who had hit Austin with a car, and now they're buddy, and they sort of explained it, but it was kind of just like, well, they're both bad guys, so of course they're going to get along.
Yeah, that was really the kind of the bizarre thing. And throughout the entire time they're together, like they're not really together. Like they're very much individuals who Vince is kind of forcing together, which I guess like that kind of works because it's kind of like unstable a little bit, and that's okay. I remember thinking that it was a really cool idea for them to be together, but like on the shows, it really just winds up like detracting from each individually, I think. Like it makes them look like lesser stars to have to be together.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on this, it really seems to me that the hot feud would have been to turn Triple H face and make him Austin's first challenger. And it's natural because Triple H beat Austin at No Way Out 2001. And that was sort of the justification for why Austin felt like he needed to join up with Vince, was he wasn't good enough to beat Triple H at No Way Out. Was he good? He had that doubt in his mind whether he was good enough to beat The Rock at WrestleMania without Vince's help. So you just have Triple H as the natural number one contender after he's previously beaten Austin.
Yeah, and it would have made a lot of sense on the shows too, because with Austin turning heel, there wasn't another top face. Like there wasn't anybody there to replace him. So you would have thought that Triple H would have been the best person to be in that position. But when they do the two-man power trip, there's just kind of nobody there.
No. So the challengers they choose are The Undertaker and Kane. And Undertaker is really over. Gets a huge reaction when he comes out on this show. But Austin Taker was a match that it was a match that had always drawn well for them, but they'd just done that to death. Like, those guys had so many pay-per-view matches, and this was a different version because it's Biker Taker and Austin's a heel, but I still just don't feel like there was a lot of juice in that feud at this point.
No, there's actually so little juice that I don't know if like many people remember it, but during the next month, like after this pay-per-view, it actually becomes very little about Undertaker and Kane, and they kind of start feuding on the side with the Hardy Boys. And that winds up getting them over as heels way more than Undertaker and Kane do.
Well, they've already done the Hardy Boys stuff.
Oh, that had already happened?
Yeah,
okay.
So so they're desperately trying to get Austin booed because some people are going along with it because it's part of the show, but there's still a lot of the audience that's cheering him. So one really hot angle they set up is they did a match with, I think they did a match with Austin and Triple H against the Hardys, but it ends with them, Austin and Triple H, getting chairs and just beating the hell out of both Hardys and Lita. And like, this was a pretty controversial angle at the time. This got censored in Canada and I think censored in the UK too. They just like cut this segment out of the show because it was just really brutal man on woman violence, like ton of chair shots to Lita, like rough angle. And that's where they kicked off, I think, if I'm remembering this right, that's where they kicked off the feud against Undertaker and Kane, because Taker and Kane came out to make the save on this.
Yeah, it does continue a little bit on into the next month, though, because Jeff Hardy does wind up beating Triple H for the Intercontinental title at one point. But it just...
that hadn't happened yet, had it?
No, so it's actually
okay. I was thinking that had already happened, but yeah,
it's kind of funny because
that happened in May.
Like, it winds up getting the Hardy Boys super over. It doesn't wind up doing all that much for Austin and Triple H, who still can't really get booed, like, to save their lives. But holy crap, it got the Hardy Boys over.
So the one other big thing I want to cover is something that didn't happen, but really would have had a huge impact here, which is Shawn Michaels did not come out of retirement. The rumor at the time, in February, March, was that Michaels was going to come out of retirement and he was going to face Triple H at WrestleMania 17. Basically, it sounded like they were going to do the storyline they ended up doing the next year, where he faced him at SummerSlam. What's been reported is that Michaels showed up to TV to shoot the angle to set him up for WrestleMania, and like, he was intoxicated and he was a pain to get along with, and they ended up just sending him home, and that kind of put the period on any suggestion he was going to come out of retirement at this time. And it's just kind of rumor because I've never heard Michaels talk about it or heard anybody speak about it publicly who has any authority, but it was very heavily reported at the time in the Wrestling Observer and, on the internet. Like, I was reading this on Raja.com back in the day, that this was what was going on. So do you remember hearing about this? And how big an impact do you think this would have had?
I actually do remember hearing about this back then, because obviously when I was 16, I was heavily on the message boards and stuff trying to get all the latest rumors and everything like that. Shout out to Raja.com, which this will now be posted on. I remember that, and I remember thinking that, like, that would be the perfect time for Shawn Michaels to come back. Obviously, he physically or personally couldn't, but that might have been the solution to their top babyface problem. But that still doesn't...
this would have been huge.
Yeah, but it doesn't really solve it, because he would have still been paired off with Triple H, and Austin still wouldn't have had anybody to really work with. So I'm still not sure what
be that after WrestleMania, Shawn would be the first challenger. Shawn Austin too at Backlash would have been huge. I think that's a 500,000 buy show.
Yeah, that would have been enormous, and that's something that you can kind of carry on through. And I mean, if we talk about the Invasion stuff later on, like, he's somebody on Team WWE that makes so much sense. Like, it's just one of those things where, like, you can absolutely see how their booking planning leads to the Shawn Michaels face return, and that they didn't really have an option B. Like, if that was their plan and they didn't have a second option and Triple H refused to turn face, that's the situation we wound up with.
Well, it's part of what makes it crazy that they turned Austin. It's dicey to turn him no matter what, because he's the most beloved face in wrestling at this point. He's the guy who they built their business around. He's the guy who brought people into wrestling. It's like when WCW tried to turn Goldberg. It's like trying to turn Dusty Rhodes heel in Florida. They tried to turn Steve Austin heel in Texas. And of course, 90% of the crowd still cheered him at WrestleMania 17 when he was shaking McMahon's hand. Yep. Austin has talked about this many times publicly. It was his idea to turn. He just felt like he had done everything he could do as a face. He preferred to work heel. He wanted to do something different. He thought he would be. His theory was the old theory that the hotter the baby face, the hotter the heel they'll be when they turn. And I can, maybe see how that would have worked in the old days, but this is already getting into a more modern age of wrestling where the fans are little, willing to go along with what the company's telling them to do. This is one of the early cases, I feel like, of they tried to turn a guy and the fans just were like, nah, we're still going to cheer this guy. We still love him.
It is interesting
which we get a lot of today.
It's interesting how quickly that era turned, though, because when Hogan does this in '97, and maybe it's because the fans were more ready for it then.
The fans already did. So many people were already booing Hogan at that point.
Right.
Hogan was getting booed heavily in a lot of their towns at that point. So a lot of people were begging for it.
But Austin's arguably the biggest babyface of all time, maybe aside from Hogan, at least during this era he was. People weren't ready to be done with him yet. So this
is what's crazy. He had just come back from injury. Like he's only 6 months back from missing a year with neck surgery. So It's not like he was stale. Like in 2002, I feel like he was starting to kind of feel stale and like the Stunner and Beer act is kind of old. But at this point, I don't see that at all. Like he had a ton of sympathy coming back from injury. It was fresh. He had new people to work with because he hadn't worked with Jericho. He hadn't worked with Benoit. He hadn't worked with Angle. And I just don't see respect. I think it turned out to be one of the worst business decisions ever in wrestling.
Yeah. And I mean, they wind up trying for 6 months. They do everything to get him heat. He's stunning everybody. He's beating the shit out of JR.
And then they go in the opposite direction and they take away all the things. Like they have him stop being a badass, stop stunning people. He starts singing songs with Kurt Angle and playing the guitar, and that doesn't work either.
Yeah. And even with all of that, there's a moment right when the invasion is first starting where they're having that big brawl and Austin's at the bar.
One of my favorite moments ever.
Yes. And he's like, is he going to come back? Is he going to save us? Is he going to save us? And he comes back. Good. In that moment, they could have turned him face, no repercussions.
They did a huge rating that week. He got one of the biggest pops ever, and then they squandered it, and they made him the leader at the invasion. But don't want to get off track. We'll talk about the invasion another time. But yeah, that showed that was the way they should have gone, and they stuck to their guns foolishly. They didn't listen to the crowd, and without getting into the modern era, because we talk about the old school on this show, I think we're seeing a lot of that in the modern era where they're not listening to the fans the way they should be. So here's where we are for this show. The main event is Steve Austin and Triple H, who are respectively the WWF champion and the Intercontinental champion, facing The Undertaker and Kane, who are the tag team champions. And it's not just a tag match. It's not just for the tag titles. It's for all the belts. What do you think of that kind of stipulation?
Yep. And actually, I hate matches like this. I really do. I don't know why. It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with it. And the build to it was actually pretty good. But it pisses me off for some reason, having all the belts on the line in one match.
They had done this. So they've done different versions of this. They had done the exact same match at the In Your House in September '95, where it was Diesel and Shawn Michaels against Yokozuna and Owen Hart for all the belts. Done like the world titles on the line and tag match thing. They did that at King of the Ring 2000 with Triple H and the McMahons against Austin, Kane, and Undertaker. So it wasn't anything new. I mean, I think it's kind of clear what happened here is they wanted to have Triple H and Austin team up because they're the new dominant heel faction. And then they say, okay, well, we need to have the tag titles in there too. So we have titles. And then they're like, nobody's going to buy this show just to see a tag title match. Like this would have been the first time since Fully Loaded '98 that they had had a show without a world title match. So they're just like, well, we got to put the world title on the line too. And why not throw the Intercontinental title in too? Like that'll be enough to get people to buy it.
Yeah, and they start scrambling in order to make this match happen. That I'm pretty sure the Taker and Kane win the tag titles on the SmackDown before this show.
Yeah, they hot shot we'll talk about all the title changes, but yeah, they are just like I think there's an idea that like once Russo left, they stopped hot shotting, and they really didn't. Like, no, except for the world title and the women's title changed hands on the way into this show between WrestleMania and this show in the course of a couple of weeks.
And that's just madness. It really is.
So getting to the show, first on Heat, Jerry Lynn defeated Crash Holly to win the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship. And my only comment there is, as much as I've been critical of how they've handled the Cruiserweight division, it's still way better than the Light Heavyweight division was.
Yeah, that's the worst division anyone's ever booked in wrestling history, maybe.
Yeah. This match is a year after one of the only good light heavyweight title matches was Dean Malenko versus Scotty 2 Hotty at Backlash 2000, and a year later it's just like a title, no heat. Like they're putting it on Lynn here, I assume, in anticipation of the invasion because WCW has a real cruiserweight division, but this title ends up just kind of being forgotten. Like it's just dropped at the end of the invasion and replaced with the cruiserweight title.
Also, if you want to talk about hot chatting belts, this is May. By June, which is when King of the Ring happens, they're having a match between X-Pac and Jeff Hardy for this title. So,
yeah. Sorry, Jerry Lynn. His WWF run did not work out. That'll be a recurring theme on the show, actually, is ECW guys whose WWE runs did not go as they were supposed to. And the other match on Heat is Lita beating Molly Holly, which it kind of surprised me that that Lita wrestled here because for a while after getting beat with chairs, because I assumed they had her off selling her injuries because she's not on the main show for the Matt Hardy match.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but not much. I mean, Heat was the pre-show at this point. They would always do a couple short matches to get the crowd fired up and kind of itch to get people to try to buy the pay-per-view. So then we get to the main card, opening match, X Factor against the Dudley Boys.
X Factor. Oh my God, do I remember X Factor? First of all, they have the most legendarily bad entrance music in the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah. For those of you who don't remember, it was What You Looking At by Uncle Kracker, which is the most heel theme imaginable.
Oh my God. Like it's literally like, I can't even describe it to you. Everyone just go and YouTube that shit right now. It is phenomenally bad. Just imagine.
Entrance is blinking purple lights. Like, come on.
Everything about it says we're never going to get a real push.
Do you have any idea why they were a stable? Like, I don't remember anything about, and there was no explanation from the announcers about like why these guys are a team. Like,
yeah, I do remember. It was actually it was a reward for X-Pac, right? Like he had always been a guy who worked better in stable, so they kind of gave him his own to be the leader of, and they let him choose two guys who he wanted in his stable, and he chose Justin Credible and Albert, who aren't really doing anything.
Yeah. But are both, pretty competent workers, and like Albert was a guy they definitely saw potential in and never really found the right push for.
Right, and it just didn't quite work, but like the elements of something were there, and they got a pretty decent push for a couple of months. Yeah. It's just that like it never really came together. X-Pac's not a stable leader. Nobody in the stable had like charisma really of any sort.
Justin Credible has come in from ECW. In ECW, he was like the last great ECW champion. Like he was their top guy after everybody else had left. But he's been stripped of all the things that made him cool in ECW. Like can't do the tombstone pile driver like he did in ECW. Doesn't have his kendo stick. Doesn't have his jean shorts, which I swear were kind of sort of cool back then. But yeah, I mean, he's just a guy in tights and white socks now.
Yeah, the only compliment,
no personality to speak of.
The only compliment to really give X Factor is X-Pac and Justin Credible's double super kick is maybe the best double super kick like ever in the business. Like it's called X Marks the Spot, and it's genuinely awesome.
Take that, Young Bucks.
Yeah, take that.
Yeah.
This is my Jim Cornette shoot.
Perfectly serviceable opener. The Dudleys opened a lot of pay-per-views in this era, and they're always a good choice to get the crowd going. So the Dudleys here, they've got Bubba Devon and Spike. So we've got ECW refugees galore across this card. But it's kind of just a generic tag match. X Factor gets heat on Spike for a while. Hot tag to Bubba. There's some chaos after the hot tag. X Factor get the win with the double super kick. Only really notable thing about this match was this is where the X-Pac sucks chants are really getting loud.
Yeah.
But he's a heel, so of course they're booing him. The term X-Pac heat, I don't think comes along until a few months after this during the invasion when X-Pac continues to be a heel and get booed, even though almost everyone in the WWF turns face during the invasion. X-Pac was still a heel.
It's actually funny because I think like Roman Reigns kind of has that X-Pac heat right now, where it doesn't really matter what you do, you're going to get booed, or the situation or anything like that. Like the fans have just decided to hate you. Even if it doesn't make sense or anything along those lines, that's kind of what X-Pac heat was. It didn't make sense
because I don't know why X-Pac had that kind of heat.
I have
off the
no
top of my
idea.
head, it's not like he was that much in the run up to this.
No, he didn't do anything to earn it. It was just
He's
one
just
of those
generally kind of a scummy looking guy. Maybe that was it.
It's just one of those groupthink things where like a bunch of people decide they hate X-Pac, people pile on, becomes a bandwagon, can't get out from under it.
I feel like he's really respected. I mean, maybe it's podcasts he's done where people have gotten to hear him talk and like heard how smart he is about wrestling, or people just going back and watching his matches and seeing how good of a worker he was. But yeah, at the time, the groupthink was everybody hates X-Pac.
It's important to remember that work wasn't appreciated in the same way on a wide scale back then as it is now.
No, that's probably a fair point. So the next match to me was probably the surprise match of the night because it was a really, really good match. Hardcore title, Rhino, the champion, defending against Raven. So Kane left WrestleMania as the hardcore champion. To be found in the hardcore title match. Don't remember what had happened in the lead up to here, but they changed this hardcore title so much that there was no point trying to follow it.
And you know what? Like, I've always hated the 24/7 rule. Like, I know that that's what made it entertaining and good TV for a lot of people, but I thought it
was fun for a few months, but they kept it going too long.
But like this match kind of shows that they had something with the hardcore title. It was like a different style of wrestling, something like, and the people who were in that division were only in that division, and it made sense. Like Raven can't beat Kurt Angle, but he can get hit in the face 20 times and not get pinned. That's pretty good. That's his talent.
Yeah, so we have a battle of former ECW guys here. Raven is a guy who, when they brought him in, my expectation was Raven's going to be a top guy because he had been a pretty big star in WCW. He was one of the top heels in WCW.
Yep.
You know, the top non-NWO heel for a while. But he comes in and gets, really no push. Like almost immediately dropped into the hardcore division and kind of just forgotten about.
It's clear there's heat there. Like it's not just the normal, like, oh, we forgot about you. Like it's heat. It has to be.
I mean, turns out partying with the boss's college-age son is a bad idea, and those scars last.
Absolutely. Like anybody who
leaves, of how he got hired, but apparently, Vince isn't a details guy, so maybe the story is that Vince just saw him backstage and was shocked that they had brought him back and was really pissed off about it. Which, I don't know, sounds crazy, but I can see it.
I can kind of see it. It sounds like a Vince story for sure. Though obviously,
I don't think Vince was ever all that involved in the talent relations, talent acquisition. I think he just trusted JR to do that in this era.
Agreed. Though honestly, if I had seen Raven's facial hair during this era, I wouldn't have wanted to push him either because he looks like a dirty pirate.
So this match, it's a hardcore match, but I thought there's a lot of shots to the head here, but they're not brutal, gross ones. It's they're hitting each other with little signs and the fake trash cans. So I think the shots get good reaction, but they're not killing themselves. It's not unprotected chair shots to the head or anything crazy.
Right. Though I was genuinely worried.
Match. Crowd was hot for this.
Yeah, I was genuinely worried every time they used that shopping cart, though, because that's an unpredictable thing to use in a match.
Yeah. So the finish, Rhino sets Raven up for the gore, right up against the shopping cart, misses, goes through the back of it, through the child's seat.
So cool.
Raven goes to hit him with the kitchen sink. Literally, they use the kitchen sink. We've seen that in a lot of hardcore matches, but he misses. Rhino hits the gore and Rhino retains. Really good match, surprise match of the night. Crowd was really into Rhino here.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's how did Rhino not work? He just looks so
short. He's 5'10". Like
I know, but
it's the same thing as Taz. Like you get in that WWF ring against bigger guys, and like suddenly you're like, oh, that guy's super tiny. Like today it wouldn't stand out because the guys are so much smaller. But yeah, at this point it's like Rhino against the Undertaker, and he's a foot shorter.
Yeah, that's a good point. But man, he just moves and he looks so dangerous in this match. Like it's crazy how good he looks.
So you didn't always hate Rhino.
No. WWE Rhino, I was into. I loved
TNA
him.
Rhino, you had a
I didn't
problem
hate
with.
him until the front line. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So I'm sort of skipping over the stuff that happened between the matches, but I wanted to highlight this. They showed a recap of a promo from Shane McMahon, which was him reciting Shane and the Beanstalk, which I popped for because it's the same promo Roman Reigns did about Big Show a couple years ago
Yes,
with the Magic Beanstalk. But Shane is a lot more charismatic, so like Shane is able to pull this off.
Yeah, it's actually a great promo. I loved it.
Like it's funny. I mean, like it's just set better too because he wasn't in front of the live crowd. He's like got a gimmick storybook that like where he's crossed out Jack and written Shane instead, and like it's silly, but he makes it work.
Absolutely.
So
and
speaking of silly but making it work, the next match is William Regal versus Chris Jericho. It's the Duchess of Queensberry rules match, and nobody has any idea what the hell that means, which is the point of the match.
it's actually funny because WCW did a very similar storyline to this. And I don't know if it was like the Canadian rules match, but it was between Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. And that's one of my favorite matches from late WCW.
I don't think I've seen that. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember which one of the 2000 shows that it's on, but it's on one of them. It's like the only match in all of the 2000 shows I actually gave a good rating to. Like, it's so much fun. And this is actually a better version of that. I love this match. It's great.
So Regal lost the Intercontinental title to Jericho at WrestleMania. And then a few days later on SmackDown, Regal cost Jericho the title against Triple H. So no titles on the line here. The gimmick here is Regal announced it as Duchess of Queensberry rules. Nobody knows what that means. They don't announce any rules before the match, but Regal has a woman dressed up in like a British wig and like British royalty clothing that he brings out there. So the gimmick is that Regal is going to make up the rules as he goes along. Early in the match, Jericho hits the lion's salt and he covers, and the bell rings, and then we get the announcement that under the Queensberry rules, the first round of the match has just expired.
And that's just fantastic heat because the fans are like obliterating the match now. They're just like, what the fuck? And everybody plays it really well and it's good.
And so this is where I sort of question what so in the storyline, this is not obviously not the real Duchess of Queensberry. This is like some hooker that Regal hired to play this role. But she's apparently like smart enough about wrestling to know what to do to save Regal. Knows like to, call the end of the first round when he's about to be pinned. So that part like interests me. They don't ever explain what the deal with this is, and this character is forgotten after this, but I'm intrigued by like why does she know the rules of wrestling so well?
Right. And that's actually why the WCW version of this was actually a little bit better, and at least in this way of explaining itself, is they actually had like Jacques Rougeau out there with a book that he wouldn't let anyone see. And he'd be like, here it is, page 3, there's no submissions, ha ha ha. Like here, it's just like the Duchess of Queensberry just literally just says like, oh, no, this is the rule. There you go. Do it.
I really enjoyed how Heyman kept like trolling JR by acting like he knew what the rules were. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but yeah. Paul Heyman is on color commentary for the show. He was an awesome color commentator, and him and JR were an awesome team. I love JR and the King from this era.
Yeah, they're a phenomenal team, and they like the hatred for each other that they have is so palpable, but they're such professionals that they work together. Like it's a dynamic that works. It's the only like two announcers that hate each other that has ever really worked, and I really do enjoy it.
And that's the thing. They fight, but they always manage to do it in a way where it doesn't. They always get serious when the match gets serious, which is the important part. Like, they're not bickering when the real stuff is going down. So next kind of Regal screw job is Regal taps out to the walls of Jericho, at which point it's announced that under the Duchess of Queensberry rules, there are no submissions.
Which is just a fantastic rule to put in, even though I'm pretty sure at this point Regal's winning all of his matches with the Regal stretch.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure something else out. They go to the floor. Jericho hits Regal with the Duchess's scepter. Actually, I have that backwards. I think Regal hit Jericho. But it's revealed that there's no disqualifications. Then, Jericho's had enough of this, so he grabs the Duchess and drags her into the ring and puts her in the walls of Jericho, which, again, doesn't really feel deserved at all. She's just an actress or somebody who, Regal has hired to play this role. But, because of the era we're in, the fans are mad into Jericho beating this woman up.
Yeah, the thing that gets the biggest pops throughout the course of this show is probably women getting harmed, which...
There's plenty of that.
I mean, that's not great.
No. I'm glad that they've moved on from this. But in this era, this was just something you were going to get a big pop for, was when the heel woman got beat up. And then while he's got the Duchess in the walls of Jericho, Regal comes in with a chair, hits Jericho with it. There's no disqualifications, so Regal gets the 1, 2, 3. I thought this was really fun for what it was. It's a silly match, but it's a mid-card match. There's no titles involved, so I don't really feel it. There's no title to be devalued by the way this went down. I just thought this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked online at other reviews of this show, and most of the other reviews that I read are basically this show is perfect except this match, which sucks. And I couldn't feel more differently.
Jericho lost.
Yeah, and it's this is anything that's not a super clean finish or whatever, people just automatically dismiss as wrestle crap. This was a lot of fun.
And this is the other thing, is this is the era of Jericho's being buried.
Right.
Basically everything after he lost to Triple H at Fully Loaded in 2000, people were just Jericho's being held down. And that, honestly, complaint never really went away until he had his first point where he left the WWF, because after that he never, for the next few years he's never, kind of on top where internet fans wanted him to be.
Yeah, trust me, I was part of that group. Jericho is my dude, and I think my first few couple of posts on wrestling forums were all about how Triple H was holding down Jericho. What a prick. Jericho deserves to be the champ.
Yeah, no, very common sentiment at the time. So next match, it's another gimmick match, because in this era, just about every match on a pay-per-view was going to have some kind of stipulation, but it's a 30-minute ultimate submissions match between Angle and Benoit. So this is a 30-minute Iron Man match where you can only win by submission. What do you think about Iron Man matches? I've never really been a big fan of this gimmick.
I hate them. I cannot stand Iron Man matches, because the general idea of an Iron Man match is that you're going to lose repeatedly and then just keep going. And
this one is especially bad about that, and we'll cover that during the course of this match. But I think Benoit in particular comes off looking very poorly in this match.
The only way an Iron Man match works is when you do it like Hart and Michaels did, where there's only one win. But in that case, why not just have a match? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't get the point of the Iron Man match. It's just one of those gimmicks that just automatically leads to bad matches that kind of devalue the people inside of them.
Well, I think one of the things that really makes wrestling great is the sudden death aspect of it, that it can end at any time. And in an Iron Man match, you take that away.
Yeah, until the last 5 minutes, which are the only part anyone cares about.
You're never going to have somebody win an Iron Man match 3-0. Oh, we just beat him easily. Good win for so-and-so. No, it's always going to be the heel is going to get ahead and the face is going to come back. And that's been the story of almost every one of these they've ever done. It's like the 2 out of 3 falls match, where it's just kind of the fans know exactly how it's going to go, and you're never going to swerve them with this format.
Right. And just like that, people are always hot for the last fall. People are always hot for the last 5 minutes of an Iron Man match. Why not just cut out the fucking middleman,
Yeah, exactly. They could have just had a 30-minute submissions match, or just a straight-up 30-minute match would have been really great. I would have loved to see these guys just have a wrestling clinic for 30 minutes out there. But so just that they had a match at WrestleMania, and Angle beat Benoit with a dirty pin, and they were both submission wrestlers, so they have a submissions match. So sort of the way this goes is they wrestle and somebody gets locked in a submission and they tap out immediately when they get put in a submission, which makes total sense with the format of this match. And the announcers do a good job of explaining why you have to do this, that it's not worth, trying to fight out of a submission and getting your arm broken or getting your knee tendons twisted, because you'll be done. There's no way you'll win the match after that. But the live crowd is not hearing this explanation and doesn't buy this. So when Angle goes up 3-1, tapped out, immediately to, arm bar and knee bar and holds that don't normally get submissions, the crowd is getting angry at the booking. I felt like the boos were not boo, Angle is winning. It was more like boo, Benoit is getting buried here.
Right. And it's important to remember, like, this is like the closest thing to an amateur wrestling match that I think WWE ever put on in this era. I mean, basically, that's what it is. Like, you tap out really quickly. As soon as somebody locks you in, or you get the pinfall for the 1 count, and it just goes quickly, and you rack up a couple of numbers, and it's all about how you finish at the end. Nobody watches amateur wrestling who watches pro wrestling. There's no crossover. Nobody understands what's happening here. I don't know why they would think that they would.
Yeah, so for most of this match, the crowd is dead, or the only real reaction is kind of anger when Benoit is tapping out. So Benoit gets down 3-1 and makes his comeback. 12 minutes to go, he gets Angle in a half crab, and Angle taps out. And then 2 minutes to go, he taps Angle out with Angle's own ankle lock, and they're tied 3-3. And then right at the end of the match, Angle gets Benoit in the ankle lock, and Benoit doesn't tap out. Time expires. Angle walking away, the referee rules that they have to go into sudden death. I don't know why the referee has the authority to make that rule, and that doesn't really make any sense to me, but that's the way it goes. So they do a quick 90-second thing. Benoit gets Angle in the crossface, and Angle taps out. Benoit wins 4-3. Big pop for the finish, but other than that, crowd was flat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Benoit and Angle had 4 or 5 matches during their time in WWE, singles matches. Yeah. This is probably the worst one.
Yeah,
I would say the
one was probably the cage match on TV, which is insane. But
yeah, either that one or the Royal Rumble, which is just also a straight up match.
I forgot about that one. That one's amazing. Yeah, Royal Rumble 03 is one of my favorite matches.
Yeah, this one just kind of doesn't let them just do what they do. You know what I mean? They are so phenomenal at working off of each other and just doing whatever, that just sort of forcing this gimmick on it just gets in the way.
Yeah, I felt like this was one where the gimmick really detracted from what the match should have been.
Agreed.
So next match, we got another gimmick match, Last Man Standing, Shane McMahon versus The Big Show.
Now let me ask you right off the top. Do you agree with my stance on this, that they should not have had Shane continue just wrestling random matches after he won at WrestleMania? They just made him a wrestler on the show, which is bizarre.
They probably should have had it, since they're building up WCW, they probably should have had it be Shane is off scouting, talent for the new WCW. Shane is popping up to, try to recruit WWF guys for WCW. Yeah, I probably would have kind of this Vince Shane feud and, let Shane lay low and pop up occasionally in a way that feels special to kind of give updates on what's going on with WCW. But yeah, I would probably not have kept these matches going.
Yeah, because he feels like he's under Vince's authority, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, he very much is, because he's forced to wrestle in this match, even though he should have left the WWF once he bought out WCW.
Right.
So yeah, just to recap, in the storyline, Shane bought WCW instead of Vince. Shane is the owner of WCW. He was feuding with Vince because Vince was having an affair with Trish Stratus. They had an awesome street fight at WrestleMania that Shane won. That's the peak of crazy overbooked good attitude era matches, I would say.
Yep.
And then as punishment, Vince makes Shane wrestle Big Show. It's a last man standing match. And, I think everybody has heard people complain about Shane McMahon being able to be Superman and fight, top guys. This is a more tolerable version of that because he doesn't really the only time he gets over on Big Show here is when he uses chloroform on him. I love that we have a streak now of shows where chloroform is used as a weapon. We'll have to see how we can continue that for the next one.
Yep.
One thing I'll say in fairness here, and it's always this way, the crowd is hot for this. Shane is super over. They're way more into this than they were the Angle Benoit match.
Yeah, and this is sort of the beginning of the transformation of Shane into a superhero.
Yeah.
Which will be kind of continue on throughout the course of this year and even on into the Kane feud later on. And even honestly until now. That Shane had always been a chicken shit, dipshit sitting next to his dad, a coward who never really could fight or anything like that.
So great in that role is the thing.
Yeah.
I like him so much more as that than as, badass MMA fighter Shane. So much better in the corporation.
But this is the Shane that lives on in people's memories for whatever reason.
Well, because he jumps off the fucking jumbotron.
Yes,
he drops an elbow from 30 feet in the air at the end of this match. So of course, people forget.
Yeah,
that.
I do want to talk about that now. I want to do the match first because that's what we need to talk about from this match.
Yeah, so Shane gets a chair and hits Big Show with a bunch of unprotected chair shots to the head and some kind of stiff ones because the chair gets bent. Glad they don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Then he smothers him with chloroform, and as Show is about to go out, Vince shows up and hits Shane with the chair to save Big Show, and then Show hits Shane with a bunch of choke slams, keeps picking him up. But Test, friend of Shane McMahon, comes out and saves Shane. And this thing with Test is actually kind of a cool, understated bit of continuity they did, that Shane and Test had feuded in 1999 because Test was dating Stephanie and Shane didn't approve of that. But after Test won the street fight against Shane at SummerSlam 99, they kind of shook hands and Shane gave Test his blessing to date Stephanie, and they agreed they should be friends. And then after that, for several years, no matter what was going on, whether Shane was a face or a heel, Test was always on his side. He was his friend when he was a face fighting against DX and Triple H in late 99. And then he joined the McMahon-Helmsley faction in 2000. And then here he's helping Shane out. And then later when Shane is the leader of WCW, he joins the alliance with Shane. And it's just kind of one of the really a rare instance of continuity in wrestling.
I just kind of wish that they had just gone forward with making Test his official bodyguard or something like that. They could have given Test a rub off of that. They just always
they
just
had a lot of chances with Test, and they never went with it.
Right.
I don't know if he had I don't think he had what it took to be a top guy. He could never cut good promos, but he was really hot at the end of 1999 with the Triple H and Stephanie storyline, and he just totally got cast to the side in that, and that was kind of his last chance, I felt.
Yeah, and I forgot how good of a look he had, because when I saw him here, I was like, holy shit, that I want to pay money for that guy. Holy crap.
Well, he looks great, and this is before he's really, when he came back in 2007, he was super duper, bulky and overpuffed on steroids.
Yeah.
Here he's a lot leaner, and he could still move.
But yeah, and then I guess that takes us to the big spot, which a lot of people have tried to denigrate it over the years by saying oh, they fall on the cardboard or whatever. And it doesn't matter.
Falls so far here. This is higher than that. This looked higher than the cell. This looked like 30 feet he dropped. And they fall onto a crash pad, balsa wood platform or whatever. But 30 feet is 30 feet. And if he misses, he hits. There had to be some concrete somewhere down there. He could hurt himself. This is still crazy, crazy dangerous.
I love too that Test is standing right there. He's standing 10 inches away.
Yeah, he's holding Big Show down.
Shane could have hit Test because Test doesn't move. Test has a lot of faith in Shane here.
Yeah, and Shane McMahon is just such a ridiculous athlete. We saw him do that amazing shooting star press at WrestleMania, and he's almost 50. He's just always been a guy who was a remarkable athlete. And here, he jumps off that thing and just kind of floats down and lands, and apparently everybody was fine.
Yeah. And then one of the more understated parts of this match, the part that everybody forgets, the touch where Test runs and grabs the camera boom and he brings it over and like hangs Shane off of it to win the match is like,
Yeah.
I laughed so hard. I did not know that was part of this match.
Because he could have just picked him up and like held him up or put him on his shoulder or something. But yeah, instead it's much more elaborate than that.
Good old Test helping out.
Yeah, Shane beats the Big Show thanks to Test. I mean, yeah, Big Show is losing to Shane, but at this point, Big Show was so far past. They'd already screwed up Big Show at this point, so who cares?
Exactly.
Next up, we've got a triple threat match for the European title. Matt Hardy, the reigning European champion, defending against Eddie Guerrero and Christian. Now, Eddie Guerrero won the European title from Test at WrestleMania, but on the SmackDown before this, he lost the title to Matt. So it's just another kind of title change out of nowhere. I think the only reason they did this was they were starting to look at pushing the Hardys as singles, and they didn't really care about the European titles. So just throw that on Matt and see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. And Christian gets in just because I guess they mentioned in passing that he begged Regal to be in it, but I guess that just happened.
That feud against the Edge Christian Matt Jeff Hardy was such a long running feud that sure, just throw him in there.
Right.
This was a good match, but it's filler. Like nobody cares about the European title.
No. And I will say that they tried to pack so many interesting spots into this match that like it was too much.
Yeah,
like everything was so
quick match. This is like a 6-minute match, and they're really going all out trying to get everything in that 6 minutes.
And like you can tell most of them are Matt Hardy spots because they're like weirdly intricate, like that like thing where he's like running at the guy who's near the apron and he throws him up onto the ropes and he swings back into a DDT. It's like that's cool. Why are you wasting that on this match?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is. This might have been his first pay-per-view singles match. I think before this he'd only done tagging with Jeff, and they were looking at pushing the Hardys as singles guys. Not long after this, Jeff beats Triple H for the Intercontinental title, and they dabble with giving them singles pushes, but they end up just putting it. It doesn't really click, and they end up putting them back as a team.
Right.
By the start of 2002. But yeah, nice little match here. Just kind of a buffer before the main event. Matt retains after interference. Edge gets involved. Jeff gets involved, and Matt ends up getting the pin to retain.
Jeff does a swanton bomb where he jumps like 5 feet past the person he's supposed to be splashing, and then he jumps up and punches the ref right in the face. It's like a really weird sequence of events.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've sort of covered this, but like. Every match on this show is a gimmick, interference. Like there's they're just afraid. I feel like to do any kind of straight up wrestling match because people wouldn't care, and they're probably right to think that because they've conditioned them that every match has to have interference, every match has to have chairs and tables.
I really feel like that Angle Benoit match at the Royal Rumble that we talked about that might have been the match that changed their mind. Like, because this continues right up until like that point, but that's a straight match, and it's like the match of the year. And I really feel like after that is where they finally go the other way. So it's going to stay like this all the way up until 2003.
Yeah, that's probably about right because that match did get over huge in the building. I remember Benoit got a standing ovation from the crowd as he was walking out after he had lost. So that actually probably is the match where we start seeing things swing back towards, okay, we can just, let our amazing roster of talent just wrestle each other and trust that the crowd will get into it.
Yeah, because this next match isn't that.
So, main event time. We've got the power trip, Steve Austin and Triple H against the Brothers of Destruction, The Undertaker and Kane. It's winner take all. Steve Austin's World Wrestling Federation title, Triple H's Intercontinental title, Undertaker and Kane's tag team titles. They're all on the line. And my question is, why? Why did Vince make Austin's guys defend their titles here? There's no explanation.
No,
the video package has this one little clip where Vince is like, "God damn, pal, tough negotiation. Had to make you put the titles up." And it's like, what?
Yeah, I guess that the idea was that they wanted the tag titles so they'd have all the belts. Then they never establish why they need all the belts.
Owns
And
the
then
company. Like,
and they
Vince
and
can
like
make matches.
and Taker and Triple H didn't, or Taker and Kane didn't have the tag belts until that Thursday. So like that was clearly not the goal of the feud. Like what exactly? I have no idea why why Triple H and Austin even wanted this match to begin with. Much less why they cared, why they were willing to put their titles on the line for it. Like Vince, who owned the company.
With wrestling heel authority figures, there's just a certain amount of this you have to deal with because, like, they've shown there's no limit to the power of the authority figure. They can strip titles from guys for no reason. They can put guys in patently unfair matches. They can refuse to count pins when the guy they don't like is winning. So, reason why anybody ever has to do anything, Vince doesn't have any reason for this, but it's just this is what they need to have happen, and this is the way it is. You know,
yeah, just the way it is.
There probably should be like a babyface commissioner of some kind to counterbalance Vince, but they don't have that. And
I said that's the role
Vince
that like
would just fire the commissioner if he didn't like him.
Well, that's the role Linda always played, right? She was like the ultimate like veto on Vince, where she'd like come in and even odds.
Foley had been the commissioner, but he had been fired a few months before this. But
right,
yeah. So they have a stooge heel commissioner and Regal, and this match just happens because that's the way it is.
And yet, for all of Steve Austin's reign as champion, he's going to get screwed into title matches he doesn't want to wrestle, despite the fact that he's in bed with the boss. Like it's bizarre.
Turns out that wasn't worth nearly as much as he thought it was when he got into it.
No, and he should have known better because he's the one who was fucking it up before that.
Yeah. So Austin gets a mixed reaction. Like the camera finds all the anti-Austin signs in the crowd, but there's still a lot of people cheering him. And Chicago was always one of his hottest cities. It's where they turned him face at WrestleMania 13. So it's another place where it's hard to get the fans to boo him. He gets a mixed reaction. Triple H got a lot of cheers too. Triple H is a very cool heel at this point. People like Triple H, and they were probably ready to cheer him at this point if they had turned him. Kane gets a good reaction. Taker gets a really big pop. The biker Taker character was definitely over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean that's not really a huge surprise. Though I was surprised by how over Kane was, because that's one of those things that I always forget, is that Kane was like a big deal at one point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for years here, like Kane, he continues to be big. He takes the mask off, and at first he gets the huge push, and then they kind of let it all kind of falls apart. And I think after that was when he stopped mattering. Like when Undertaker kind of squashed him at WrestleMania 20, I think that was kind of the end of him being a really big deal.
Right.
So the big question I have here is, what are the rules of this match? Do you have any idea? How do you win the WWF title?
Okay, based on the commentary, because this is not something that they establish in the video package, it's not something that they announce ahead of time, it seems like Kane or The Undertaker will get the individual title of the person they pin. So, like, if you pin Triple H, you get the IC title.
Wikipedia says the opposite.
Really?
I don't know. Yeah, Wikipedia says that if you get the pin, you get the WWF title, and your partner gets the Intercontinental title. I don't know. This is a WCW.
Yeah, later in the match, like, Kane is, like, gonna beat Triple H, and Jim Ross very specifically says, is he gonna win the IC title here?
And that could be a mistake by JR,
it could be.
Maybe not. Yeah, and this is normally something the WWF did well, is they would always make clear what the rules and the stakes of a match were. They explain the rules of the Royal Rumble every single time because they're doing it for the person who's watching wrestling for the first time, so that person knows what the rules are. And here they completely drop the ball on this. This is one where they needed to put a graphic up on the screen explaining how you won which title, because it would factor into the story of the match. Like, Kane would want Austin in the match instead of Triple H because they want to beat him, and you could have dissension between them because they each want to be the world champion. But we don't get that. There's no explanation as to how that works.
No, I mean, there's really not. It doesn't make any sense.
So the big story of the match here is Kane has an injured arm. They had done an angle where Austin and Triple H smashed his arm on the way into this, so his arm is all taped up, and that's the only way that Austin and Triple H can ever get the advantage is by preying on Kane's injured arm. When Undertaker's in the match, he's always kicking ass, and then he'll tag in Kane, and Austin or Triple H will get after Kane's arm, and they'll take over. So there's a long, long heat segment in this match, like over 10 minutes of them just working on Kane's arm. And this was a long match. It was 27 minutes, and I felt like that was probably a little too long for kind of the quality of wrestling we were getting and the fans' level of interest in this match.
Oh, it absolutely was. It didn't make any sense for it to be this long. This isn't like one of the, like, Undertaker and Kane are both very over, and they're both very good. But neither one of them is a guy that you need to have a 30-minute match for. After 10 minutes, they've shown you everything they're going to show you. And the crowd reaction is just going to die off after that.
Undertaker's not in the shape he would get into in like 2007, 2008 when he was having those classic matches. Here he is not got those kinds of lungs. And he's on the apron for most of this match waiting for the hot tag, so that's okay. But yeah, but both two really big guys trying to work a 27-minute match is tough.
Yeah, and let's get to the finish, which was just hot garbage.
Okay, so what happened in the finish here? The ref gets bumped. There's a hot tag to Taker, who's in the match for like 2-3 minutes. Right, and then Hebner is finally like, no, you didn't tag. You have to get out. I'm not counting the pin. There's another ref bump. Austin and Taker fight off into the crowd. Stephanie gets into the ring and gets big booted by Kane, which is the pop of the night. Vince then shows up with a sledgehammer, although his timing was off because you could see he was all the way out there. They portray it as like he's coming out to save Stephanie, but he's like all the way out to the ring before she even gets hit.
And he almost tears both of his quads again.
Vince gets into the ring, but gets cut off. Triple H gets the sledgehammer, hits Kane with it, and pins him. Austin and Taker are still off fighting in the crowd, but Triple H gets the pin after a sledgehammer shot. 2 ref bumps, 2 people interfered, and a sledgehammer. Referee didn't see
And let me illustrate just how awkward the ending of this match was. Like, Stephanie gets the big boot, and then she's just laying in the middle of the ring for the entire rest of this. Meanwhile, like, Kane and Vince and Triple H are all trying to like do stuff like around her like prone body. And so like Triple H kind of vaguely hits Kane in the arm with the sledgehammer, and then he kind of stumbles over Stephanie to like kind of tap him in the head with it. Meanwhile, Vince has run totally the wrong way around the ring to get to Hebner, so it's taken him like 5 minutes. Like it's like a comedy show. Like it's horrible.
Yeah, Stephanie, when she got hit with the boot, she needed to roll out of the ring and get out of the way.
Yeah, and she sells it like she's in a coffin. Like she is not moving.
The boot killed her. She's dead.
Oh my God. It was so sloppy and bad, and it made Kane look horrible. And like the fans weren't feeling it at all, so it didn't get any heat on it. It was just bad.
Yeah. So this match is basically a Raw main event. Like this was the kind of match you saw on Raw all the time in this era where we're going to take the top 2 feuds and just do a tag match playa. Yeah, so, I mean, not a ton of heat on the finish. Austin and Triple H leave with the belts, and that's how the show goes off the air. So they did a good job. I mean, they put over the power trip. Like, they have the world title, the Intercontinental title, and the tag titles. So that's impressive, but match, not particularly good and way down from the standard of main event we had been getting at WWF pay-per-views before this. And that's, I think, sort of why this show action at the time was just they had been on such a hot streak in 2000 and the beginning of 2001 that this show, which was kind of average, just was a huge drop from WrestleMania, No Way Out, the Rumble, and the quality of shows from 2000.
Yeah, I do just want to say one thing about the match. The best thing about it was as it finishes is Jim Ross, because I had forgotten how amazing he was at the end of pay-per-views when the heels would win. And so they go close on the Undertaker as he's looking angry and shocked. And then like Jim Ross is like screaming in the background, as long as the Undertaker has a breath in his body, there will be hell to pay. And it is the most amazing visual. It is something that is absolutely missing from wrestling today. It's just like that feeling like Jim Ross
is like this kind of mediocre, sloppy finish, and he's putting it over so strong. This is the greatest injustice that's ever been wreaked upon anyone. How are they getting away with this? You know, Undertaker, there's going to be hell to pay. You have got to tune in tomorrow night to see Undertaker go after these guys. He's going to make them pay. And that hard sell.
And he's like our voice, right? He's like the one talking to us. So when he says this stuff and he seems personally invested, you feel personally invested. Like, I didn't care about this match. But in that moment, I was like, oh, shit, Undertaker's going to murder someone.
Yeah, this is all to say Jim Ross is the man. I was so happy to see him back at WrestleMania.
Agreed.
I understand that at this point he's not going to be the full-time commentator, but God, I just wish we could clone him and he could call Raw forever, because he is the best there's ever been and the best there's ever going to be.
Agreed. And this just illustrates it. Like, nobody else has this in them. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I have is, how did this show do following up WrestleMania 17? And I would say not great. Like, when you look at what sold WrestleMania 17, it was Austin and The Rock, the two huge stars, these two compelling personalities, these two huge baby faces. And Rock is gone making a movie, and Austin's a heel now. So you have lost one of them due to circumstances beyond your control, and you've gotten rid of the other one, which is just insane to look back on, that they willingly gave up the hottest thing in wrestling.
Yeah. And honestly, like, if I told you, if you were coming into this cold, didn't know what was going on, if I told you that this show took place 6 months after WrestleMania, I would believe it completely. It is not connected in any way.
The tag division's kind of dead. Like, at 17, we had that awesome TLC match, but here we've got Christian and Matt in a singles match. We've got the Dudleys feuding with X Factor, and the tag belts are, kind of an afterthought in the main event.
Yeah.
And Chyna's not on this show. Chyna was one of their biggest stars at this point, and like, it's going to sound crazy when I say this, but with Austin and Rock gone, Chyna might have been their biggest babyface star in terms of having had a ton of mainstream exposure in the year leading up to this.
Though this was like the peak of Diva Chyna, and she's just come off like burying her only feasible challenger. Like, it's. Yeah. I don't really know what you could even have done with her.
She's done. I mean, she's basically done after she has her last match at Judgment Day. She wrestles Lita at Judgment Day, and then she disappears and is never heard from again.
Yep.
So I mean, that's its own saga. This, I guess, is when, I don't know when she and Triple H split up. But yeah, at this point, it's clear that they're burying her and they're going to get her out of the company. But that's it's a totally alternate path. But she could have been somebody they really pushed hard and featured. If Austin was going to be a heel and Rock was going to be gone, like, she is one of their biggest stars at that point.
Yeah, I think I remember Austin saying on like a podcast or something too, like, he never got a chance to like have a match with Chyna, but he would have sold for her. Like, that's one of those interesting things.
Huge. Well, yeah, they announced SummerSlam. I don't think it was ever going to happen, but she won the #1 contendership for SummerSlam '99.
Right.
And it was just a messing with people on TV kind of thing, and they blew it off the next week. But yeah, like, that would have been a huge match if they had ever done it.
Yeah, so like, in this era, to be like, aha, Austin, you got beat by a girl, like, that's something that they could have done. Like, that's something heel Austin could have done.
I think they would have sold a ridiculous number of pay-per-views for that, and like, it would have generated a lot of controversy, but that just would have gotten it more attention and probably made it sell more.
Right. Just missed opportunity after missed opportunity from this era. That's really what defines it. Like, we talked a little bit about going into the Invasion, what they eventually wind up with and what they could have had going into WrestleMania is just two completely different worlds.
Yeah, this was a time of so much optimism. I mean, people's thought is, they own WCW. We're going to get the dream matches we wanted. They're going to run WCW right and make it a great company again. And we're going to be able to do WWF versus WCW supercards, and it's going to be amazing. And guys they don't have room to push on WWF can go to WCW and none of that ends up happening.
Nope.
Win all the great WCW talent and squander all of it. They squander the NWO. They squander Goldberg. They squander Scott Steiner, Booker T, DDP. It's just unbelievable the opportunities they missed. Like, they sort of bat zero in this time span, and their audience just contracted and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk every month.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And I remember watching and feeling like I liked the invasion. I thought it was really interesting, but that's only because I didn't know who anybody was. I remember feeling the interest in the people around me in wrestling wane. You know, I remember like telling people about it, and one week they'd be super excited, and then I just kept finding people who were like, yeah, I kind of stopped watching. It got confusing. Or like, I don't know who any of these people are. Who cares? Just like becoming a wrestling fan went from something that was absolutely normal to something like, yeah, we used to watch like overnight during this era.
It went from like every pay-per-view, like one of your friends is getting it, you can go over to their house to watch it, to like you and the one weird kid are the two people who like wrestling.
Yeah. By the time WrestleMania 19 comes around, like literally, like I have 3 friends who like wrestling, and we're the only ones in school who like it, and we have to watch it together, even though we don't like each other that much. It's just, that's how it is.
The sacrifices we make.
Yep.
All right. So, yeah, any final thoughts to kind of put a bow on this show? Not a great show, but a really interesting one.
Yeah, not a great show. It is really interesting. I had just like 2 notes. Like, there is one segment where they go to like WWE New York, and in front of Steve Blackman is more fried food than I know that he has never eaten that much fried food in his entire life. Like, this is Steve Blackman.
Has probably had probably not eaten a carb in 10 years at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. And I did make a note because Jim Ross tries to get over a couple of weird nicknames on this show that I've never heard before or since. Like, he calls like Chris Benoit like the Wolverine machine at one point.
Yeah, that one didn't click. I wonder if they couldn't trademark Rabid Wolverine, or maybe Vince didn't like the word rabid.
I don't know. But the best one is in the opening match. He calls the Dudley Boys the Wizards of Wicked Wood like 7 times. Like, I don't know if they were trying to go with the Wizards of the Wicked Wood, but holy shit, is that not getting over?
The Red Hall of Fame as far as Jim Ross nicknames that didn't catch on.
Oh, my God.
Steve Austin, the Bionic Redneck, did kind of catch on. I don't really know. That's not really a heel name to me. But
no, it's really not.
They were kind of cool. Like, that's kind of shirt I could see people wearing.
Well, like the Cerebral Assassin is from this period too, and that definitely got over.
Yeah. But yeah, so Backlash 2001, a really interesting time in wrestling. A lot of good stories from this era. Hope we did a good job covering a few of them. Cewsh, you have any last words? Anything you want to plug?
We're doing the CewshCast. Obviously, our scouting report on NXT got pushed back a little bit because I'm working on something else right now, but it'll already be out by the time this podcast is out, so don't worry about that. But our NXT scouting report, which will focus mainly on the new people, since people just got pulled up, and you'll want to know who's coming into NXT now, is going to be up probably in the next week.
Awesome. And you can find all that over at the blog, CewshReviews.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week, and, you know, interesting to cover. All right, so guys, next week we'll have for you a review of the inaugural WWE Draft. That was 2002, a week after WrestleMania 18. They came together. Ric Flair drafted the Raw roster. Vince McMahon drafted the SmackDown roster. You want to hear where everybody ended up, where Steve Austin ended up, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, an incredible amount of talent they had in that era.
And it is one of the biggest clusterfuck shows that ever aired in any sort of wrestling context. It made no sense. It was garbage, and it's going to be fun to break it down.
It's going to be glorious. So tune in next week to hear us talk about the inaugural WWE Draft. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is Law and Cewsh. We'll see you next week.